All right, welcome back to another Wright Stew podcast. I am Paul Stewart.
And I am Brian Wright, and neither of us, you're not in the speaker studio. Looks like you're on the road a
No.
little bit there, Paulie.
Yeah, I'm in the backseat of our car, Brian, and
That can be good and bad.
it maybe at a different time in life that was good. At this time, it's not bad right now. So I'm at a Hampton Inn down in Columbia, South Carolina. Got a chance to yesterday see my daughter's first college softball game, my second daughter. So she's at Columbia International. It's an NAIA school down in South Carolina. And learning a lot about what NAIA is. So if you're not familiar with it, it's a sanctioned college athletic governing body. It's not the NCAA, but still play pretty solid softball down here. And they have other sports as well. But got to see her really, really proud, proud parent moment, seeing her from when she was 4, 5, 6 years old playing t-ball and coach pitch to now achieving one of her kind of lifelong dreams of playing college softball. So really exciting moment. She got to hit a little bit, got to pitch a little bit, and then they have a couple more games today. Actually, she'll get to play with one of her kind of lifelong teammates as well today. So she's playing for Georgia Southern. So we'll get to see some friends as well during that game. But really exciting times. And back on so I'm in a hotel. We've also got my wife and 2 other kids with us.
Always
Which is why I'm in this car recording, because they're still sleeping. And they probably wouldn't appreciate that. I did walk around, look for a spot in the lobby or like a business center did not have. There was a laundry room, a laundromat sort of thing that I thought, but could be a little interference with people walking in potentially. So here I
got a question. A couple
Yeah.
things come out of that. NAIA, I'd heard they're actually the oldest conference or the oldest sanctioning body, older than the NCAA.
I'm not sure. It could be. That could be fair. Yeah, I'm not sure.
And
I know I
then,
played with a couple of guys who played in a. So Bucky Jacobson, who made it to the big leagues for a little bit, he played at Lewis Clark State. He does actually a radio show out west now in Seattle, the Chuck and Buck show. And then Jared Mathis, another guy, played with NAI. He went to Embry-Riddle, a great aeronautical school. But they were very proud. They were very proud of NAIA. They were big honks for it. So it looks just like softball from
hey,
what
they
I've seen.
crossed over though. So you said Georgia Southern?
No, it's not Georgia. It's coastal Georgia, I want to say.
Coastal Georgia. Okay, coastal Georgia is who they play. Okay, very
Maybe
cool.
I said
Very
Georgia,
cool.
but I meant coastal, I think.
No problem. I may have misheard.
Yeah.
So, hey, getting into well, obviously we got the Super Bowl coming up. They're starting to give out awards and stuff. We saw, Eli Manning. Some people are saying gets, snobbed or rejected or whatever as far as Hall of Fame. When you think of Eli Manning, do you see him as somebody that should be in the Hall of Fame?
Early in his career, I didn't think so. And I think that was the argument. Some of the stuff I've read and seen and heard is he was never mentioned amongst the elite of his position while he played.
I agree.
He was never first team all pro. He did make Pro Bowls, which as we've seen doesn't mean as much anymore. But then again, he was in the same era as Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, the end of like he was in there with 4 or 5 of the legitimately maybe of all time. And then the big clearly the feather and the 2 feathers in the cap are beating the Patriots in the Super Bowl twice, being the Super Bowl MVP, and then he was the Iron Man. Like what was it, 164 games straight played without injury or played
got and continuing to stay in.
And so then he was a bit of an accumulator because he finished in the top 10 in every major passing statistical category by the end of his career. And so here's the one that's interesting for me. Phillip Rivers will be eligible next year. So Eli and Phillip drafted same year. I'm curious to see how Phillip Rivers is. If Eli doesn't make it in, I don't think Phillip Rivers makes it in. But
No.
that's a different story. Yeah, but
Well,
yeah, I'll
no,
be really curious.
I think that is an interesting conversation because the reality is there is Eli had two really spectacular years. I heard him say yesterday his one of the years that he won the Super Bowl, he threw for over 6,000 yards, most in history,
Oh, jeez.
including regular season and
The
playoff.
playoffs. Okay.
So, and then obviously beating the undefeated Patriots when they were 18-0. I'm kind of thinking two Super Bowls alone or two outstanding seasons don't make up for the others being,
But he
slightly
wasn't. It's
above
not like he
average.
was a scrub. He wasn't like a subpar.
No, but
And the comps I saw for him were Dan Fouts and Warren Moon, who both were first ballot Hall of Famers. Both had similar-ish regular season records. Neither made a Super Bowl, and Warren Moon never even made an AFC Championship game, and he was first ballot. Again, we get caught up, I think, a lot in this first ballot, second ballot, third.
yeah, I didn't
And then
think
we
football
saw,
did that. I didn't think football did that. I heard some people arguing yesterday. Well, he's not a first ballot, and I'm like, well, either he
yeah.
is or he isn't. To me, I
Well, it was
guess that's
so
how they distinguish.
Eric Allen, who made it this year. It was his 19th year on the thing. I'm like, dude,
I thought they had to get off. I know they're
it's
eligible.
it's 20 in the NFL. It's 20 years.
Wow.
We've talked about this a lot with baseball. It's 10. NFL, it's 20.
Wow.
I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
19. Like, what are you?
So in your mind, hey, just so we're clear, so we may disagree on this. And I don't have super strong feelings, but in your mind, Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer.
I think he is. Yeah. I mean, so when people are arguing that, they talk about, oh, he was an accumulator. But yeah, hey, what's the best ability? Availability. He was out there. He was playing games, and I know he had a really. And I think if he wasn't in New York City, he probably wouldn't be scrutinized as much. If he was in Indianapolis or San Diego, where the media pressure is as much, I think he's a no doubter, just because he doesn't have all the negativity, shown on him.
I might would argue the opposite there. I think because he is New York, this is even a conversation. I think if he's somewhere else, and maybe if you win 2 Super Bowls, that makes you an automatic, Hall of Famer. I don't know. I haven't dug into it enough. I remember watching him a number of times, especially, and maybe I'm just remembering the end of his career. And it's like he wasn't. I feel like the qualifications. You need to be for 5, 6, 7 years. You need to be a top 5 player. And I don't know if he was that, right? I feel like we kind of, when we were discussing Hall of Fame for baseball, we kind of, it's easy to feel fluid, and we, as far as what are the metrics that require it?
Yeah.
I think the only reason I don't think it would even be a conversation if his last name wasn't Manning. I think if his last name was something else, I really don't think he would. I don't think he would be getting in if his name wasn't Manning.
He went two. So Joe Namath is in. You look at Joe Namath's numbers. His numbers aren't great, right? And I know it's a different era of football.
That's what I would argue for him.
But anyway, Eli accumulated the stats over a career, and I know if you look at his record and things like that, it doesn't jump off the page. But I mean, for me, maybe it's just the 2 Super Bowl runs that set him aside.
Yeah, and I think that's the
longevity.
I think that's the best argument because they said his regular season record. If we're giving him credit for the Super Bowl wins, his regular season record during his playing career puts him right in the middle as far as quarterbacks. And you don't think about a Hall of Famer being right in the middle, right? You think about them. Aaron Rodgers during his prime, right? 4 MVPs. Wins 1 Super Bowl. No brainer in my mind. Eventually Lamar Jackson has won a couple MVPs, and probably maybe should have won this last year. Hey, so let's jump on that.
Well, so one more guy of the same era.
Yeah,
Ben Roethlisberger. So I think Big Ben is in a very similar boat to Eli, right? Won the 1 Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And then again, could be a wildly frustrating quarterback at times, could be a wildly effective quarterback at times. Was always, I think, probably had more wins than Eli did regular season. Part of that was he was on better teams with the Steelers, more consistent head coaching and management. So I mean, I think we're coming up on an era where there's a lot of, as the passing game has become much more prevalent, and we'll talk about this with Josh and Lamar here in a second, but there's a lot of quarterbacks now whose numbers are a lot gaudier than even the quarterbacks we grew up who were like great, Dan Marino and John Elway and Joe Montana. You got guys like Kirk Cousins now whose stats are coming close to passing theirs, right? And nobody puts that group in the same category, right? Kirk Cousins and Dan Marino.
Well,
but just based on the way passing is now, we've got quarterbacks who are doing more than quarterbacks of the past generations.
Yeah, I don't know if accumulation of stats quantifies you. I feel like you got to go against your peers of your generation and against his peers. The top 5 or 6. He may be in the top 6 or 7 during that. You mentioned Tom Brady. You mentioned who else was kind of his contemporaries, Paulie, when he was going through.
Well, it was just Peyton Manning.
Yeah,
right?
so
Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre at the end, Ben Roethlisberger, Philip Rivers, Matt Ryan. Those are all pretty solid. I mean, maybe it was just a great era for quarterbacks as well.
Well, no,
right?
I think it's going to continue to be that way. You think about, we got Daniels coming in now. We got Lamar that's there. We got Josh Allen. We still got Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be a no-brainer. Yeah. I kind of feel like the Hall of Fame should be your best 2 or 3. And I don't know if I put Drew Brees. I put Drew Brees above Eli, even though Drew Brees only won 1.
Yeah.
And I feel like the category that he's in really is with Roethlisberger. Those two kind of feel like they're similar careers, similar accumulator stats. Every year as the passing game becomes much more prevalent, now there's going to get the limitation. Now there's 17 games, so there's going to be greater stats. I don't think, being, top 10 or top 15 in stats puts you in at this point. But, his 2 Super Bowls and beating the Patriots, I was pulling pretty hard against the Patriots during those times. Again, you probably were pulling for the Patriots.
The Chiefs now?
Yeah, so you were probably pulling for the Patriots. You like the dynasties.
Well, outside. So early on, actually, so I was pulling for the Rams, the first Super Bowl. I was a big Torrey Holt guy. He was an NC State guy. I like Torrey Holt. I was pulling that greatest show on, but the greatest show on turf. Those Rams teams, that was the dynasty when the Patriots beat them. Like the Patriots were not the dynasty. A couple years later, the Panthers. So I was pulling for the Panthers to beat the Patriots, and then probably as the Patriots got into their 3rd and 4th, so I liked Tom Brady, man. Like he was a good story. I mean, late round pick. You see his combine story, like him doing the sprint. He actually sprints faster now than he did when he was like 20.
That body was terrible. Like you think about, obviously he did not work on. What's interesting with him? Like you see that body, it's like no way he actually lifted weights in college. Like again, I know you didn't have to, but it seems like he would have hit the weight room a little bit in college. It's odd that he was such a hard worker, clearly, but clearly the weight room was not his friend.
And some, Brian, you know how that is too. Some of that is genetic, some of it's diet, and clearly he's figured out a lot of that part of it.
Well, he looks better now, like Benjamin Buttons. He looks great now. I mean, 47 or whatever he is.
Fella.
Yeah.
Good looking guy, yeah. But yeah, I think he was on college campus, probably eating at the calf, just crushing food. You're in college, you're just eating every chance you get.
But you're also working out too. It's just interesting that his body looked like that to me, to be honest with you.
But I think he
clearly a hard worker. It's just interesting. And I would say he changed his body after that too.
I think he started taking the nutrition and everything to another level as well. And then you see all the stuff he does with personal trainers and all that. And So you mentioned Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson as this generation's version of the quarterbacks, right? And those two with Patrick Mahomes and a couple others are at the top of the class. So Josh Allen narrowly beat Lamar Jackson in one of the closer MVP votes of all time. I heard this is one thing I really hate when they said voter fatigue of Lamar Jackson because it's similar to what we were just talking about. What, you're just tired of somebody being good, so you're gonna give it to somebody else? Like that's the like dumb. That's just vote. We should just like that's the ultimate. Oh, it's a participation. That's what that is. I hope that's never the case with anybody. Like, oh, just tired of him. And realistically, I've heard this argument too. Looking back at like so early 2000s NBA MVP awards, they're like Shaq should have gotten the MVP every year.
Yeah.
But he was just in a category of his own. Like you couldn't quantify like Steve Nash, right? How did Steve Nash beat Shaq? And like if you're starting a team,
it was really ridiculous. I do think there is, whether we like it or not, there is voter fatigue. I think the year before, obviously Lamar did win it. You could have argued it could have went to somebody else the year before.
And the one that also came up this year, and that a lot of people are fired up about. If Saquon Barkley doesn't win it this year, there's not a position outside of quarterback that's ever going to win this award again. It feels like.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I would say, I didn't mind the pick. I would say though, if we were looking just objectively, and this is supposed to be just a regular season award.
Correct.
Lamar had a better regular season than Josh Allen, objectively.
So he threw for 400 more yards. So average more yards per game. Lamar threw 41 touchdowns. Josh threw 28. Lamar only had 4 interceptions. Josh had 6, which is still really good for both. Lamar ran for 915 yards. Josh for 531. Josh Allen did have 12 rushing touchdowns to Lamar's 4, but once it got to the red zone, they're handing the ball to Derrick Henry. And
you could argue it's smarter to be handing the ball off. And I don't know. It just this year. I think last year there was more of a question. This year, Lamar should have won it. I mean, voter fatigue. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to argue.
Well, the argument I heard for Josh Allen too was he elevated his teammates and had less around him to work with, which again I think is stupid. Like that's not Lamar Jackson's fault. Like or Josh Allen's, to be fair, right? But
I think that when you get into subjective arguments, you lose the ability to argue, right? I like objective arguments. Like you hear, well, the eye test. That's like, whose eyes? Your eyes, my eyes? Because my eyes tell me Lamar. I mean, anytime you start talking about subjectivity and he didn't have as much to work with. Well, that's nobody's fault.
Well, so did Bryce Young win the MVP then? Because Bryce Young didn't have a whole lot to work with, and he did okay. Like that, and that goes back to like baseball when you're starting to break down all these metrics and statistics, and like, oh well, if you take this player and you put him in this position, then you start getting really subjective and start getting really nerdy about it, and I'm just like, man, like, again, Josh Allen's a great player.
Dude, he's probably my favorite player in the league.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I loved what he said. He's like very humble. Like, man, this is a team award. He's like, my teammates wanted this for me more than I wanted it, and so again, you can tell he's loved by everybody in his team and the community and the Bills Mafia. But like you said, if we're just objectively looking at numbers and I guess the Bills had one more win in the regular season than the Ravens did. Maybe you attribute some of that to a weaker AFC East conference as well, though, right? The Ravens are playing in a little tougher conference, maybe. But again, dude, I'm just numbers wise and watching both of them play this year, both great players. But Lamar just, man, was dominant out there, and again, the more I read too, I was like, gosh, Saquon Barkley, fella had a year. Like rushed for over 2,000 yards. Did a lot of the team stuff we talked about. Kind of put the Eagles on his back for a little bit when Jalen Hurts was injured and out. Man, like, there's a great argument to be made for Saquon, and if he's not winning it this year, it's going to be really tough for a running back. And some of that feels like there needs to be the media push, like almost like the Heisman voting sort of thing. Like you need to have people like sending out buttons and ballots and stuff all season to make sure you're getting those votes. But
and I don't love that. I would say Lamar had arguably one of the greatest seasons that a quarterback has ever had, including Peyton when he threw for 55 touchdowns. And I know Brady had some years that were flirting with those numbers, and not to win it, it feels like, I don't know, it does feel like he's robbed. I mean, because here's the deal. It doesn't really matter long term. No, he wants to win the Super Bowl. Josh had no MVPs. Lamar already had 2. Really, Lamar should have 3. Lamar is that unique of an athlete. I think you mentioned it earlier. I think they punished Lamar for having Derrick Henry and Flowers and some of their guys, some of their weapons on the outside. Yeah. Whereas you couldn't name, I can't think of the little receiver for Buffalo, but he was pretty dang good. They had Coleman as well. They had, really good running back. And so anyway, it's interesting to see, but it does feel anytime you start bringing up, my eyes tell me that Lamar didn't have to carry his team as much. It's like, oh, okay, good. Let's not be. Yeah. I like again. I'm a meat and potatoes. I like objective facts that get us to a conclusion, not subjectivity. Yeah. It's like my daughter. She's at a dance competition right now, right? It's subjectivity, right? There's some things that you got to do to be able to get where you need to get to. They're in Virginia right now, and there's some technique, but it's very subjective.
We've talked about this. That is, my wife loves gymnastics in the Summer Olympics and figure skating in the Winter Olympics. I do not care for either sport. I appreciate it, but I dislike any sport where there's not a score, runs, points, where it's judged by people. And I get there's things they're looking for from a technical perspective, but then if somebody's just like, how much flair did they have? Whatever. I don't know the lingo, right? But because I remember growing up in the Cold War era, I was like, oh, it's a perfect score. No, the Russian judge gave them only a 5.1. I was like, what? Like, why is the Russian judge always giving the American guy or girl less points? That's weird. And then, like, Russia. That. So for me, any sport where it's you have people judging, right? And I know we have referees, but they're calling the game, right? There's a set of rules that they're enforcing. But people who are, like you said, subjectively, like, I like the way that looked better than
that's
that.
It.
Oh, that was
that's it.
And for me, that just I can't get behind that. Having your fate in the hands of, and some of that like boxing. Boxing, you get some really wonky decisions and some of that, and like, what were the judges watching? Like, why everybody scored it this way, except for that one judge who, I mean, must have had a couple of chili dogs during one of the rounds because they missed that one entirely. So man, I'm torn on that. And even so, Garner High School, my freshman year of high school, our cheerleading team won the state. We've got a banner in the gym, just like we have one for the football and the baseball and the softball. We had a banner for the cheerleaders who won the state. And I'm just like, how do you win state at cheerleading? That was really odd. I don't know. But so for all you cheer dads out there, all you cheer moms,
it's tough, dude. It's tough. I mean,
dance dads and dance moms. I know it's like I said, I don't demean the athletic ability, the skill, the hard work. I can't get behind something where there's no points at the end. Well, I guess there are points, but it's not something that you can dictate on your own to to some extent. So I don't know. Brian, we haven't talked about winners and losers of tomorrow's big game. So the Chiefs are a 1-point favorite. How you feeling about that?
I mean, I think it is a coin flip. I saw a guy yesterday, and I'm sure there's a bunch of money on both sides. I saw a guy walk into a casino yesterday and put $1 million down on the Chiefs. And I just thought about, like, even if I put down 100, I would feel a whole lot of anxiety because there's no clear-cut favorite. The Eagles tend to turn you over. They tend to find a way to get it to Saquon. And then they got the thing that's not talked about a ton with the Eagles, I don't think, is they got two real weapons with A.J. Brown and the other receiver. I can't think of the other receiver's name, but he's really good, quick, wiry guy. Yeah, and so it is it's a coin flip for me. I mean, it may end up being a blowout, but it's a coin flip. I don't have strong feelings on either side. Yeah. I'm not really pulling for either team either.
Yeah, I don't think this one will be a blowout. I mean, again, we sit here and try to predict games, and then sometimes we're close, sometimes we're just way off. But I'm hoping, just for the sake of the drama, and for me, like same as you, not really having a dog in the fight. I've got kind of feelings both ways. I've got some personal ties on both sides I would like to see. The one thing I know is I've seen some videos on Philly fans, Eagles fans specifically recently. Man,
not a fan. They are maybe the worst. And so I would, if Kansas City was playing against anybody else, I would be pulling for the other team. But Philly's fans made it impossible, dude. They just berate I mean, dude, it's one thing to pull for your team, right? It's another thing just to be a complete a-hole to anybody else who pulls for another team. It's like, dude, it's not, this isn't
it's not life or death. It's not.
And as a fan, you have nothing to do with it. You have nothing
to do with anything.
I mean, let's just. When people get all super excited, and again, I've been and I enjoy events and I pull hard for my teams, but at the end of the day, we have nothing to do whether they win or lose. And so,
have you ever been in a situation where, like, you were at maybe a State Carolina game or whatever, and somebody was popping off to you specifically, and you almost got into an altercation?
No. Even having a few beverages, I'm pretty aware that people are stupid, and I had some pretty good life lessons as a young kid that some people don't have as much to lose as you do, right? Whether you value it or whether their frontal lobe is working properly is two different things. So I was pretty aware that, if people are getting real excited in those things, now. We had some interesting situations, but didn't have anything to do with that. But I was pretty savvy that, hey, you can ruin your life with a pretty, you hear
those decades of good decisions and hard work and wisdom and intelligence can be ruined by 30 seconds of one bad decision, right? So, and you see that happen a lot of times with. So my son and I, we went to an Orioles game a couple years ago. It was Boog Powell bobblehead giveaway night. So we each got a Boog Powell bobblehead, and we were leaving the stadium. And the Ravens complex and the Orioles Camden Yards are kind of next to each other. So we were walking to our car, and there was this homeless guy who was basically asking for the bobbleheads so that he could sell them. And we had two, so we went and gave him one. But while we were over there, there's these three dudes who were just clearly very drunk. And they were like making fun of the homeless guy. They were taunting him. So when I gave him our bobblehead, it's like, hey, why don't do that? He's just gonna sell. I'm like, yeah, I know he's gonna sell it. Like, he's homeless. I don't care. But they were cussing at him, like just being really like obnoxious. And so I'm not like a super confrontational guy. But I said, man, this is wrong.
You start talking.
So I walked there and said, hey, y'all need to walk away. Like, y'all just need to. And I think, so there's three of them. The first one saw me, and then the other two, they were popping off, and then they saw my size, and they kind of backed down a little bit. And they get like I've shared this. I've never been into like a real fight.
right. You're just big.
But I was like, man, this just isn't right. Like, and so they kind of stepped back for a second. I was like, y'all just need to start walking away because this like he's not doing anything to y'all. It's like y'all just need to go away. And then they kind of backed off and they stopped for a little bit. And then I stood there for a second. I was like, man, you doing okay? Like he's like, yeah, I appreciate it. And then they stopped. They kind of walked away. So then me and my son, we started walking kind of towards our car again. And like I wasn't out to like for praise or anything, but there's a couple of people like, hey, that was the right thing. I'm like, well, y'all sit here watching these guys. Y'all do something like. And so then like 10 yards away, there was we ran into a security guy, and I said, hey, there's like these 3 drunk dudes harassing a homeless guy. So they went and he went and kind of shoot him away, sort of thing. But so that wasn't team versus team. That was more just like
well, that's
probably
people, right? And that was kind of situation. Well, we ran into some of those situations, and not even really necessarily people messing with homeless, but it is, when you booze, you do have a tendency to make some pretty poor decisions. But yeah, it's So back to the game, I would say I'm not really pulling for either team. I can feel joy. One of the few times I can actually feel some joy no matter who wins or who loses. And that's usually, I mostly tie myself to one of them. And again, we got good commercials. We'll have, hey, for and a lot of my family, hey, the good halftime show, I'm sure. And so, it should be good, dude.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. So we'll bring you a little more tomorrow on that. But hey, we appreciate you listening today. Make sure you share this with others if you're enjoying what we're doing. Send us a message on Gmail if you have the time, if you want to hear something from us, you have questions for us. Wright Stewart podcast at Gmail. Wright like Brian's last name, Stewart like my full last name, podcast at gmail.com. And then make sure you're clicking the subscribe and like buttons on all the things that you're listening to, no matter what platform it is. And we appreciate that. So, hey, go out, enjoy your day. I'm going to watch a couple more softball games today. I hope you guys are enjoying your day as well.
Out, go Pack.